Cool. I'm going to share my screen. What's up, everybody who is in the coaching collective who didn't make this call or is a new member? This is call number 1. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to share my screen here. Today, we are going to be going over about 14 slides of kind of just going over estrogen dominance here. So going to hit this puppy right now. Is there a way I can minimize this so it's a little bit smaller? That works. We'll do it over on the side like that. So, oops. So coaching collective call 1, female bodywork, estrogen dominance, plus other bodywork markers. We're going to dive into a case study of one of my clients, Katie, who had blood work done after prep. We saw that she was estrogen dominant, and then we made some changes in order to see what happens. So we'll go there for this. So right off the gate, does anybody kind of know what estrogen dominance is? Can anybody tell me? You can speak it, you can type it into the group chat, anything in between. Does anybody know the actual definition of estrogen dominance? There's no wrong, well, there's a wrong answer, but anybody? Come on, somebody guess. This is a coaching collective, so we are collectively learning here. It's honestly a super simple answer. It's like so obvious. It's too much estrogen. Correct. It's just too much estrogen. Literally, the actual definition is a type of hormone imbalance in which the body produces too much estrogen. So the definition of estrogen dominance is quite literally dominant estrogen. Okay. So how do we see if somebody's estrogen dominant in the first place? Well, the first thing that needs to be done is we need to get, this is actually supposed to say blood work, not body work, female blood work. It's call 1, give me a break. So we're going to go through labs. What are we looking for when we get labs done? Now, typically what you want to ask for or have your clients ask for is a comprehensive female panel, right? And then I usually will add cortisol to this because the female panel usually doesn't come with cortisol. Places that we can get this done are places called, there's a lab called Any Lab Test Now, which is super affordable. It's like $200 for the full panel. You can do, oh, Maria's in here, I'm gonna add her in. You can do a Quest Diagnostics, you can do LabCorp. Those are kind of like the top 3 that I see that people can go to get these done. So what are we looking for? So what are we looking for here? We're looking for LH, FSH, DHEA, SHBG, the full thyroid panel, cortisol, progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone. That's pretty much it. On top of that, they'll typically do a metabolic panel, which will show us everything from A to Z in terms of, enzymes and vitamins and, everything else in between there. But this is the main thing that we're looking for, especially if we're looking for hormone imbalances. So moving forward. Oh, wait. I'm supposed to be on Katie's blood work here. Give me a second. I think my slides got messed up and now I don't know how to exit this. Okay, I messed something up. So Katie's blood work. There we go. Jeez. Okay, so Katie's blood work number 1. Can you guys see this or am I not sharing it with you yet? You can see this blood work right now? Thumbs up. Cool. Okay. So this is Katie's blood work. This is her first blood work right after prep. We're going to get down here. We can see here, her thyroid is actually not bad at all. It's like right in the normal range or right in like the mid range there. Mid range is what I'm looking for. Too high is usually an issue and too low is usually an issue, but let's kind of look at what's going on here, right? So progesterone is less than 0.1. I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty damn low, right? Estradiol is also pretty damn low, which is a 5.1. But here's the thing, we'll get back to everything else in the meantime. So a couple other things I want you guys to note. Cortisol is at a 16.8, which I deem very high for somebody. Typically, I don't like to see that higher than like a 12. I prefer like a 10. That's just my own personal thing. Like there's not really like a science backing for that. Obviously the lower cortisol, not the lower cortisol, the better, but I prefer it on the lower end of the range. This is kind of near the higher end of the range. DHEA if we look here, is 116, which we can see is only 6 points from the absolute lowest marker on the blood work. To me, that's a red flag. Okay, I prefer DHE to be somewhere in the middle as well, kind of like between the 250, 300 mark. I deem as like a safe spot where it's functioning optimally and not underperforming or overperforming. If we look at where testosterone is, this is also a huge issue. It's less than 3. So I don't think anybody here needs to explain why low testosterone is a bad thing. And what's crazy about all of this is based off of Katie's response, how she was feeling, everything in between, we would have never known anything was wrong. Like seriously, she felt great the whole time. She had good pumps. She responded well to her reverse. She wasn't putting on excess fat. She was sleeping great. She wasn't fatigued, nothing in between. So we would have never known anything was wrong unless we actually got labs done and we saw, holy crap. You know, if you're feeling good like this, you're going to feel 10 times better when we actually fix some things. So the other thing to look at here is MCV and MCH are very high, or not very high. They're like just outside the high range, right? So 97 is the top for MCV. It's at 105. 33 is the top for MCH. It's 35. Okay. I think that's the only thing I'm going to touch on here. Okay. I can do ALT real quick. ALT is not a crazy concern for me. For this client's prep specifically, she did use Anavar, just an oral Anavar. She didn't need much, so we use that, and that's not uncommon. ALT and ASC are basically liver enzymes. So it's not uncommon to see those elevated after the use of orals or other PEDs in the first place. So with AST being in normal range and ALT just barely kind of being out of the range, it's not something that I deem as like super, super important for us to focus on right now. Is everybody on board with that? Okay, so that's Katie's initial blood work, or initial labs here. So let me move this back here so I can go back into order. So let's get back into the slide. So what showed us estrogen dominance in Katie's blood work? We're looking at the ratio of progesterone to estradiol here. Okay, so the easiest equation, I don't know where to put you guys to make this easy. The easiest equation here, oh geez. Okay, that works. The easiest equation here to go off of is we can take progesterone and times it by 1,000. Now, if Katie's labs, or in Katie's labs, this came out to 0.1, right? Because her progesterone was 0.1. So we did 0.1 times 1,000, which gives us 100. Now we'll take that number and divide by the total estradiol in her blood work. If you guys remember, or sorry, getting ahead of myself. So typically when we do this full equation, we want that number to land anywhere between 100 and 200, right? After we take the progesterone and divide it by estradiol. We want it to land anywhere from 100 to 200 to be in the normal range. That's considered normal. That's a good, healthy balance between progesterone and estradiol. Now, the closer this number is to 1, the more estrogen dominant usually the person is. Sorry for the dogs being in the background. They're eating right now. But usually the more estrogen dominant we are. Now, I have seen some people that do this and they're in like the 80 to 90 range and everything is completely fine. So again, not everything is always set in stone. So it's always good to remember that. So Katie's estradiol, if you guys remember, was 5.1. So if we do 100 divided by 5.1, we get 19.6, right? So we want it to be 100 and 200. This is 19.6. So it's pretty close to 1. We can see some estrogen dominance being present here. Other signs of estrogen dominance, because if you guys remember, like I said, Katie really wasn't experiencing anything that would have led us to believe she was estrogen dominant in the first place. But things that we can look at to assess whether or not a client has estrogen dominance or not would be this freaking bar is killing me right now. Hang on. Geez. So abnormal weight gain around the hips, thighs, and stomach. Like a great example of this is if you guys have clients or have seen people that are dieting, they're in a deficit, they're doing their cardio, but their body composition continues to just get worse. And on paper, there's not really an explanation for it, right? You're like, well, you're in a deficit, you're doing your cardio, but you're gaining body fat and you're looking worse. Something must be up. And this is why we start diving deeper into blood work for things like this to be explained to us. This is a side tangent here for this that doesn't really have to do with estrogen dominance, but it also does, is if we have somebody who has chronically elevated cortisol levels and their stress response is high, we'll see cortisol high. But also what happens when that happens is there is an enzyme located specifically in the abdominal region. It's called HSD enzyme. And basically what this enzyme does is produces fat cells specifically in your stomach. So if cortisol is chronically high, basically what HSD enzyme does is it's inside the cells and it kind of like tricks the cells into thinking that there's fat that needs to put on. So the cells start producing more fat cells. So that's why you see people who can put on body fat specifically in their stomach only. And you're like, dude, that's so weird. More than likely, if we got labs done, they would have chronically elevated cortisol levels and they're experiencing some form of adrenal dysfunction caused by that. And then it just kind of becomes this toxic cycle. This can kind of be the same thing for estrogen dominance. Estrogen dominance and the adrenals usually are kind of lined up in the same treatment here. We'll go into that in a second. Endometriosis is a sign of estrogen dominance, which we can argue is derived specifically from birth control, because birth control essentially causes estrogen dominance in 99% of people. Irregular cycles and heavy bleeding, depression, anxiety, not a small temper, a quick temper was what I meant to write there. So quick temper, they're easily aggravated. Loss of sex drive, aggressive fatigue, like we just talked about. Adrenal dysfunction is going to cause the body to really feel super, super lethargic over time. Can cause headaches. You can have mood swings, which kind of goes into small temper, breasts being tender, and then abnormal bloating not associated with dietary intake. So if they've been eating the same thing over and over and over again, they're not really changing their routine, and all of a sudden their body's just getting excessively bloated. They're feeling like their lower abdominal is just distended or like a balloon, and they don't really know why. That can also be a sign of estrogen dominance there. Any questions on these? Cool. I can't see everybody, so if you guys do have questions, unmute yourself and ask me. So other causes of concern. This is specifically for Katie's blood work. Okay. Son of a gun. So Katie's DHA was on the lower end of the range. To me, that's a sign it needs support. I prefer middle range. Testosterone was low at less than 3. We see slightly elevated ALT, which shows liver enzyme activity. Now, this wasn't much higher than normal range, and AST wasn't high with it. If both are elevated, I'll take action there. Injectable glutathione at 1 milliliter a day for 30 days is a good place to start and then reassess labs. So anytime we're seeing an elevated increase in liver enzymes, we're just going to need a lot of antioxidant activity. And glutathione is probably one of the best bang for our bucks here in reducing liver enzyme activity. It also has quite literally endless benefits for every function in our body. I had a client who utilized it as well for elevated liver enzymes, and I can't remember exactly what she had. I don't think it was rheumatoid arthritis, but it was something close to that. And after like 2 weeks of injecting glutathione, she had dealt with it her whole life and she didn't have it anymore. So it's really jam-packed, and you can basically be a superhuman and like never get sick. The glutathione is our body's most powerful antioxidant. So being able to exogenously use that can help a lot with a lot of things. So MCH and MCZ both were high as well. And then cortisol was in the higher range at 16.8. So we saw the estrogen dominance, and these are the other things that I looked at and flagged for concern in Katie's blood work. Now, something to consider here at the top is sometimes when we're looking at all the variables, we have to tackle one thing at a time, right? Like we can't just say, oh, here's everything that's wrong, so we're going to fix all of this at once. Sometimes we need to focus on a more aggressive battle first, or a more important battle, if that makes sense, right? So let's move on. DHA was one of the first, or DHEA, or I guess I should say estrogen dominance was the main thing that we tried to focus on this one. So with that, DHEA we saw was low. So what is DHEA's role in the body? DHEA is a hormone. It's produced naturally in your adrenal gland. Same with HGH, same with a couple other hormones as well, your thyroid. It aids in the production of hormones, right? Estrogen, testosterone, et cetera. What your body does with DHEA is it essentially like holds DHEA in reserves, and then it converts it to other hormones as needed. So if we're needing other hormones or we're needing testosterone and DHEA is super low, the body doesn't have enough to convert to try to help that testosterone. Does that make sense? Everybody make sense with that? Yeah. Low DHEA can also show signs of intense fatigue or burnout, which what else can show signs of intense fatigue and burnout? Anybody? We just talked about this. Unmute yourself and say it. Come on.
Estrogen dominance.
Estrogen dominance. Also, adrenal dysfunction. Right. So you see how a lot of these things can make us feel the exact same way. So a lot of times we can fix one by focusing on the other. So if low DHEA can show us signs of intense fatigue and burnout, it can lower levels of concentration, and your overall well-being, like your feeling of well-being, can also be lower as well. Adrenal dysfunction can contribute to low DHEA levels, but adrenal dysfunction can also contribute to all of those same things that you're feeling with low DHEA. Does that make sense? Now, when we're focusing on too low of DHEA, we also want to focus on too high of DHEA. If DHEA is too high, we can see some overproduction of hormones like testosterone, and it can actually cause masculinization side effects in women. So we do want to be careful there with DHEA levels heightened for an extended period of time. It's not, if your DHEA is out of range, you're not going to like automatically grow a penis or something, but you are, it is something that we look at and go, oh, okay, we want to make sure that comes down a little bit. Very rarely do I see somebody naturally high with DHEA. It's more so going to come from us like supplementing with things to support DHEA in the first place. We'll get to that in a little bit. Next up is how do we support DHEA? Honestly, this is just a really simple and straightforward method. Dosing DHEA as a supplement just seems to be the easiest controllable method for me. I'm sure there are other methods out there to like naturally help support DHEA, but if we can get DHEA in dosages of 5, 10, 25, 50, and even 100 milligrams, there is so much control that we have there to dose it a certain way based off of what the client's needs are. If it's that simple, then let's just keep it that simple. I don't like to overcomplicate things. Side note, DHEA supplementation is usually pretty damn lucrative for women going through menopause to help support less effective or less aggressive side effects of menopause. Just wanted to throw that in there. So in Katie's instance, since it was such on the lower end, right, it was 116, we actually ended up using 100 milligrams for 6 weeks. So we used the max, quote unquote, the max dose of DHEA here for a 6-week period to kind of help jumpstart everything. The other thing that we can do to help support DHEA levels, pretty much the same thing we can do to help with adrenal dysfunction. We can lower stress levels by removing stressful situation. We can reduce training volume intensity and training volume in general. Lower oxidative stress as much as possible. We can remove stimulants like caffeine, pre-workout, etc. All of these basically come back to the same process of like just trying to let the body chill out a little bit. So moving on to her high MCH and high MCV. So your MCH will reflect your MCV. They're not the same thing, but they're essentially the same thing, right? I don't think I've ever seen one high without the other or one low without the other. They're usually both in succession with each other. So what this indicates is that your red blood cells are just larger than normal because you have less of them. So this can be anemia. Right? This is where somebody can be anemic if they have elevated MCH and MCV levels. Now, higher levels, closer to like 125 and 130, which Katie was pretty close to. I don't remember exactly what hers was specifically. Let me reopen it back up for reference here. So her MCH was, I passed it. So her MCH was 105, right? So it was pretty up there. But oh geez. Oh geez. Oh geez. Oh my God. Please hold. There we go. Okay. So her level was 105. So 125, 130. That's typically where I'm going to start looking at things that are like B12 deficiencies or folate deficiencies, right? Or one or the other. So usually it's not both, or it can be both. It can be B12 and it can just be folate, right? So it could be one or the other there for a deficiency. We chose B12 for Katie to start with because her testosterone was low, and B12 can help support testosterone levels. So to me, looking at everything there, it made the most amount of sense, right? Remember, educated guesses have to happen in these instances sometimes. There's not a, oh, this is high, so this is the exact solution. We kind of use the elimination method here and say what makes the most amount of sense. We say, B12 kind of makes more sense just because the test is low and needs support. Let's start there, revisit in 6 weeks. Now, with high MCH and MCV, liver disease can also be a root cause here, but in Katie's stance, I deemed this very, very unlikely, but it's always safer to check than to not, but again, you're going to, not that you're going to like know immediately if you have early stages of liver disease, but if you have liver disease, you're going to know, like, it's not going to be like an unnoticeable thing. Like I said, she felt amazing all the way up to this point. She had a very responsive prep. She won her class, had great with reverse. So there was nothing that was really seeming abnormal here in the first place. Now, cortisol was also high. And I use the term high loosely because it wasn't outside of normal range. I've seen a client up with 46 cortisol. That's the highest I've ever seen somebody is a 46, which is literally insane. I don't even know what this person was doing to get their cortisol levels that high. It's like honestly impressive. But so this one's pretty self-explanatory. Cortisol chronically high from stressful events, a prep, etc., will cause adrenal dysfunction, which we saw on the other slide can contribute to lower DHEA levels, which can contribute in E2 and test not being optimized. Now, another thing here to remember is that anytime we have a really, really stressful event or a prep or something emotional like a breakup or a car accident or a surgery, your adrenals get very, very fatigued and it's going to take them time to recover fully. But if we have a surgery and they're not fully recovered, and then we have a breakup and then they drop back down and then they're not fully recovered, and then we prep because we're sad and we want to put our energy into something, and then it goes back down, right? So we're chronically not letting those adrenal glands fully recover, which cortisol is going to start going higher and higher and higher. This person's going to start getting very tired, very lethargic. Sleep's going to get disrupted. They're going to need more stimulants throughout the day. If they don't eat, they're going to be they're going to be basically useless because their energy levels are going to be so freaking low. And it's just going to be this toxic cycle, right? We see this a lot with people. They sleep in, they have a hard time waking up, they drink caffeine. Now their body's on stimulants, cortisol is high. Now when they get to bed, they've done so many stimulants throughout the day because they're so tired, they're restless and they can't sleep. And then you just kind of rinse and repeat that over and over and over again, which can cause cortisol to be chronically high. Does that make sense? Everybody get that? Cool. So when this is happening, it's significantly easier to accumulate body fat. It's harder to build muscle. It's harder to recover. It's harder to focus. There's sleep disruption, everything. Now with cortisol high, this can also lower testosterone levels. It's not always going to do this, but it definitely can do it. Again, there's not a one size fits all here that says, oh, if stress high, testosterone is going to get lower. But if we look at everything that comes associated with high cortisol, it would make a lot of sense that more oftentimes than not, this can also contribute to lower levels of testosterone. Now, I don't think Katie's level of cortisol was directly contributing to her testosterone being low, but it definitely can't be ruled out or isn't going to be ruled out as a variable that's potentially aiding in that cause of testosterone suppression. Yes? Cool. Moving on. So our plan of attack, it's always going to be client specific. So this was our plan of attack for Katie. Now, I think it's important to note when I'm doing prep athletes, I will always immediately start reversing them for about 6 weeks before I get labs done in the first place. Because after a prep or after just, you can kind of use this for lifestyle clients too. I mean, you're obviously not going to diet lifestyle clients as aggressively or anywhere close to it. But if you're going through a very aggressive deficit and then say something crazy happens in their life, like a breakup, or they lose a family member, or something that causes them a lot of emotional distress, and then we get labs done right then and there, we know shit's going to be fucked up, right? We know there's going to be reds, highs, lows, everything, and the blood looks going to look terrible. So my first stance is reversing out of a prep for 6 weeks, pulling cardio back pretty much to zero by the time that 6 weeks is up, getting food to a respectable place to just kind of let their body breathe and ease back into parasympathetic dominance. And then we can get labs, because that's going to give us a more realistic look on what's actually off. Instead of, if you have somebody who's on no carb, no fat for 4 weeks going for a prep, and then you get labs done, their cortisol's high, their thyroid's low, and you're like, oh my God. And it's like, well, no shit, their thyroid's low. They're not eating any carbs, right? Does that make sense? So this is what we did for Katie specifically about 6 weeks after her prep, when we actually got these labs back. So we reduced her training to 3 training days a week. Sometimes I'll reduce people to 2 times a week. Sometimes I'll have people completely come off training altogether, depending on how high their cortisol is. So I have another client, her cortisol is like mid 30s, and it's been this way for like 2 months, no matter what we do. So I completely pulled her off for training for the next 2 weeks, because like sometimes your body just needs as much deload from stressors as possible. Katie's cortisol was not crazy high, but we wanted to reduce it in the first place to help everything else kind of like resettle and find homeostasis. So we pulled her back to 3 training days per week. My instructions were to train about 3 reps in reserve. So we're not going into hit PRs. We're just kind of going in to stimulate and maintain what's currently on our frame. No cardio except for walks outside, keeping stress low here, just going for a 10K step goal, because movement, circulation, blood flow is very optimized, especially sunlight, right? So I want my clients out in sunlight. I want them absorbing vitamin D. I want them getting fresh air, anything that can help the body naturally lower stress. So we're also working with her on improving daily habits to contribute to a lower stress lifestyle, especially if you have a client who has chronic elevation of cortisol levels. I'm sure we all have those clients that are just absolute fucking stress balls and everything's the end of the world. Here's the thing is, we can put any protocol in place, but unless they're actually working on improving and changing their entire lifestyle to be less stressful, they're just going to find themselves in this toxic cycle over and over and over again, and their body composition is never going to improve. So working on those daily habits to contribute to a lower stress lifestyle. A lot of this can be, meditating. It can be journaling. It can be different food sources. It can be leaving a toxic job, leaving a toxic friend group, a toxic relationship, moving out of a parent's house, moving out of a living situation that you're not supposed to be in, that's stressing you out. There's so many different things. That's why I say it's client specific. So for Katie specifically, vitamin D at 10,000 IUs a day. This is something that I have really leaned into for pretty much all my athletes, men and women, in regards to just putting them on 10,000 IUs a day. Vitamin D is such a crucial vitamin for us, and 95% of people do not get enough of it. It's going to help with natural energy production, which if somebody is having a lot of stress and they're fatigued, this can help a ton. My favorite benefit of this is the serotonin production. Vitamin D has a direct correlation with serotonin production, and serotonin is actually 95% produced in our gut, in our stomach. So being able to ingest vitamin D, in theory, is going to help us with serotonin production more, which by nature is going to give us more natural energy, and it can also support some healthy testosterone levels. Fish oil, if you're my athlete, you know this one. I always dose all my fish oils at 2 to 2.5 grams of EPA DHEA a day. Can we have question from Chelsea real quick. Can we have too high of vitamin D? I've had clients put blood work back and freak out and stop taking vitamin D. We can. So here's, oh geez, what did I do? Oh God. Okay. So like there's always upper limits of vitamins, right? It's like the daily recommended or whatever. Hang on, let me look up the upper limits of vitamin D right now. And again, these are just, so it says like the upper limit for adults 19 years and older is 4,000 IUs a day, which, we can hypothesize, like they say vitamin C. I think the dose for vitamin C is significantly lower than what I've had people take. Let me see real quick. Yeah, so the upper limit of vitamin C is 2,000 milligrams a day. But a method that you can do to combat adrenal fatigue is actually dose vitamin C with a bioflavonoid. And there's a little bit more complexity here to this. I could have written this down, but I didn't because it wasn't really relevant for this. I might do a call specifically on adrenal fatigue in the next few weeks, but I've had clients go upwards of 25,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day because that's how fatigued their adrenals were and they needed that support. There's also studies of people using like 30,000 milligrams of vitamin C on an IV a day to help kill cancer cells, because vitamin C is actually toxic to cancer cells. So like there's a lot of things here where like the daily recommended, upper limit and stuff isn't fully accurate. I've yet to see anybody have any negative toxic or even see toxicity reports of 10,000 IUs a day. So can you have too much? Probably. Do I think 10,000 IUs is going to do it? No, I don't, but I could be wrong, right? Client specific. So fish oil, going 2 to 2.5 grams of EPA, DHEA combined a day. These are super powerful anti-inflammatory markers. The EPA DHA combo is something that a lot of people don't focus on when they're getting their fish oils. If you look at majority of fish oils that are pretty cheap, they usually have like 200 to 200, they have like 200 EPA and like 300 DHEA, which if you combine that, that's only 500 milligrams, right? So you'd have to take 1, 2, 3, 4, you have to take like 6 of these pills to get the dosage that I'm trying to get for these people to have the anti-inflammatory responses there. But fish oil is great for hormone optimization, for hair, skin, nails, your heart. I mean, the list literally goes on for fish oil. The next 3 are supplements that I use from New Ethics. You can use code NK if you wanna snag these up, or code Chelsea. I'm just saying. But I will usually dose somebody on Cortese if their cortisol is high. Cortese is basically a cortisol reduction agent. Depending on how high their cortisol is and how stressful their lifestyle is, I've had some clients who were just like high adrenaline clients, like I said, that freak out about everything. They're constantly stressed, and I'll have them dose it 3 times a day for 2 weeks if I really need them to. But for the most part, you can get away with once a day. Or we can do like first thing in the morning and then first thing post workout, the 2 things that are causing cortisol to be the highest, right? Because cortisol is the highest first thing in the morning to wake us up. And then it kind of goes down afterwards. So that's kind of where I would dose that there. Estracort is basically just a couple ingredients together to help with healthy estrogen metabolism and balance. Remember, estrogen in itself is not bad. We're not afraid of estrogen. We don't want too little or too high of estrogen, right? Otherwise we get estrogen dominance. So estrogen is not our issue. Too much or an imbalance of estrogen is our issue. So throwing in Estracort can help stabilize estrogen levels here. This is just a 1 pill a day. I think it's 1 pill a day, 1 or 2 pills a day. The next supplement is a chasteberry supplement. New Ethics has one called chasteberry liposomal, but you can pick up chasteberry supplements on Amazon as well. Their chasteberry supplement isn't like super aggressively dosed, which is why I enjoy it, which is why I like it, because I'm not trying to overload people with supplements. I'm trying to give them just the amount of natural support that we need to get things where we want them to be. The highest I'll dose people is 3 milliliters a day. Katie wasn't really feeling bad, so I wasn't taking like crazy precautions here to try to get things going. I was like, let's give the hormones a little bit of support and see if they re-regulate. So we did 2 milliliters a day here orally, 1 in the morning and 1 at night. We hooked her up on a B12, like we talked about. Either B12 or what was the other one? I'm completely blanking right now. Let me go back. Folate. Yeah. So either one or the other, we used B12 because of the testosterone. Now, to me, it didn't really look like a methylation issue. Like she wasn't having a problem getting things elsewhere. So I didn't do a methylated B12. We can do a deep dive on that, on like methylation and stuff in different calls. But B vitamins and folate can help if it's a methylation issue. And then we did DHEA at 100 milligrams a day, like we talked about. I did the highest dose possible for this because it was lower than what I would like it to be. And then her macro intake was basically where we had reversed her to 160 protein, 200 carb, and 55 fat. And she weighed about 94 pounds. Protocol was ran in succession for 6 weeks. And then we reassessed labs. Now, what happened during this is every time we checked in, Katie expressed to me basically after week 1 that she felt so much freaking better. She was like, I can't even believe it. Like, I never even felt bad in the first place, but I feel 10 times better. I had no idea that I felt that like I could feel this good. So now we'll look at the 6-week progression of her labs here. So I want you guys to notice progesterone didn't really budge. Okay. Progesterone actually did not recover itself. Estrogen actually came up a little bit higher. So technically she's still estrogen dominant, right? Technically on paper, she's still estrogen dominant. But now we look at DHEA and that shot up significantly higher than the normal range, which again, if it's higher, this was, a couple of weeks here. It didn't jump straight to 511 after week 1 of utilizing 100 milligrams, right? It built up over time. We got the labs done. We assessed it. We said, okay, cool. Let's completely pull off of DHEA now. Clearly it jump started. Clearly it didn't need that much support for it to get back to normal ranges. Does that make sense? We gave it too much support and it was like, boom. We probably could have gotten away with like 10 milligrams there and probably gotten her into a healthy range. But since it's only 6 weeks, I'm not too worried about it. Cortisol was a little bit higher, but I think she had gone out. She had done something the night before, which made sense why cortisol was higher. So we weren't really too overly concerned about that. It's still, higher than what we would like. But then we look at testosterone here, and her total testosterone went from less than 3 to 48, right? So there was a significant improvement here from where we were at to where we were. So -3 went up 45, more than 45 points in 6 weeks, which is honestly pretty fucking astounding, to be honest. Now, free testosterone, direct testosterone was higher, but if we look at DHEA being on overload, it makes a lot of sense. So we pulled the DHEA back and we're looking at things here. Now, other thing to note, her MCH and her MCV were also still high. They weren't as high, but they didn't really come down either. So what that tells me, and we'll get back to this now, that's her lab work. What this tells me now that we put it all together and look at the quote unquote full picture, right? Katie's progesterone is still low. However, she's expressed that she currently feels the best she has ever felt. And it's important to note as well that during this 6-week period of her only training 3 days a week and just focusing on de-stressing the body, her body composition actually improved substantially. I'm not using any client pictures on this just so I kind of keep it, confidential and stuff, but her body composition improved. She gained about 3 pounds, looks leaner, looks tighter, and looks fuller. I deem that a massive success. Right? Feeling the best you've ever felt. I don't really need, yes, we still have things to work on paper, but if we go from that to feeling the best she's ever felt in 6 weeks, why am I going to sit here and tell her, no, you feel like shit? No, your labs say you feel like shit. So therefore you should feel like shit. She feels fucking incredible. Feels like a superwoman. That's amazing for her. So DHEA was high. So we're dropping the support altogether for a few weeks, and we're going to revisit once we get labs redone again. We will get labs redone in about 4 weeks here, just because, some things were still off and we want to make sure they're good to go. This specific client wants to utilize PEDs in the off season to grow, which is fine with me, but we need all of our ducks in a row in order to do that. Yeah. So since her progesterone didn't really budge, it tells me that her progesterone's, for lack of a better way to describe this, her progesterone's stubborn, right? Like, we can have stubborn body parts. We can definitely have stubborn hormones. It just makes sense when you say it like that. It makes sense. So we're going to stay at the chaseberry, but we're going to increase it to 3 milliliters a day. And we're also going to add in a topical progesterone cream 2 times a day. Now, the one that I like to use that I'll show you guys here, if I can move this. Oh, there we go. So the one I like to do, where is Oh, that's not it. Jeez, I have no idea where my freaking my Safari browser is. Anyways, the one that I like to get is called Bezwecken Progon B. I can spell check that for you guys if you guys want to write it down. It's Bezwecken, Bezwecken. And then Progon is Progon, and then a capital B at the end. And basically what this is a topical progesterone with vitamin E. And what I'll have her do with this is rub 1 serving of it into her legs 2 times a day. This is probably I wouldn't say it's the most intense, but it's a pretty solid progesterone support if we're trying to jumpstart it back on. So she's now taking oral progesterone support, and she's also doing topical progesterone support twice a day. Now that testosterone has recovered and she's feeling amazing and her recovery is significantly better, I'm allowing her to go back to training 5 times a week, full force, because I don't deem it as something that we need to worry about anymore. The MCV and the MCH are still high. So now I'm going to throw in folic acid, right? Because one of those is usually the deficiency there. Clearly it wasn't the B12. So we're going to throw in the folic acid to see if that ends up being what helps that out there. If it doesn't, we'll dive deeper from there. I'm having her keep the B12 in this time as well, just to keep everything else supported to where it is. So we don't need as much support, but we still want to have some support there so that everything doesn't just completely drop back down. Labs are going to be done in 6 weeks again. Or it's 4. Sorry, that's supposed to be 4. And then during this phase, her body composition actually improved, as well as her well-being, strength, energy, mental space, sex drive, etc. So for just 6 weeks there, I deem that as a huge success for just an initial protocol, right? We're not going to get everything fixed in 6 weeks. 6 weeks is such a minuscule amount of time to restore hormones. So if we can get a solid base together, monitor body response, and then make some more adjustments after that. But if we can see this amount of progress in 6 weeks, that's pretty damn awesome. That's pretty damn awesome. Now, some other methods to help lower estrogen, I'll deem these as like protocol enhancers, because I think that these are things that we can just throw in of everything that I was already doing. Is we can just start eating more fiber. Specifically, I can never pronounce this, cruciferous veggies or leafy greens. Description on this, leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables actually help cleanse the liver, and the liver is what helps metabolize our hormones. So when our hormones are metabolized, obviously we're not seeing crazy imbalances like this. But these vegetables actually bind to excess estrogen in your system due to their fiber content, and then we excrete it out, which is why we want to probably have a higher fiber diet if we have estrogen dominant side effects, or we can see estrogen dominance here. Another big thing for estrogen dominance is if somebody's digestion is messed up and they're actually not able to go to the bathroom and they're constipated, your body can't get rid of that excess estrogen. So it'll actually recycle estrogen back into the gut. So you're just recycling old estrogen back into the system, and that can aid in estrogen dominance being even more aggressive. So other things we can do, we can supplement with magnesium, because that's been shown to help stabilize and lower high estrogen levels. Limiting alcohol consumption. I will typically reduce dairy as well. Both of these are just very high inflammatory markers in the system, and our goal is to just reduce inflammation and potential estrogen increasing variables as much as possible. You can use DIM, right? It supports estrogen balance by increasing 2-hydroxyestrogens, which is quote unquote the good estrogens, and it reduces 16-hydroxyestrogens, which are technically not good. Side note here, there's 3 types of estrogen. There's E1, there's E2, and there's E3, right? There's estrone, estradiol, and then estriol, which is the main pregnancy estrogen, which we don't really need to worry about here. I'm just putting it there because there's 3 types of estrogen. And then the other one that I use is potentially, I say potentially maca, because maca hasn't really been like proven to lower estrogen, but it is a cruciferous plant, and it does help a lot with lowering stress levels, which can in return kind of help us with everything we've been struggling with in the first place with this whole protocol. So that, my friends, is my first presentation here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we can go ahead and discuss Anything about that? If you guys have questions, comments, thoughts, objections, advice, opinions.
I'm sorry. I have a question.
Yes.
So if you have somebody coming off of birth control, is there like a typical protocol that you follow? Like obviously wait a couple of weeks, get labs done, but is there anything that you like right off the bat, like the chaseberry, anything like that you recommend?
Yeah. So basically, when it comes to establishing somebody off of birth control, so here's the thing is I don't really need labs to know what needs to be done. Because typically we'll look at labs in the first place and see what's off because of the birth control, but really bang for your buck things that you're going to use pretty much every time, or I should say that I'm going to use every time, is Estracort. I'll use Chaseberry, but I'll also use Jumpstart for New Ethics, because that's basically a full endocrine system support. And obviously when we have birth control in, we're taking exogenous hormones to basically create a hormone imbalance to stop another hormone imbalance. You know what I mean? So it's wreaking havoc on your endocrine system. It's suppressing endogenous hormones. So we want to make sure that when we're coming off of that, we're supporting the entire endocrine system to come back online. Right now, we don't want estrogen to spike up super high or stay super low. So Estracort helps us there. And we want to make sure we're keeping a healthy balance between estrogen and progesterone always, which is where the chaseberry can come in. So those are usually my top 3 power packed if I'm having somebody come off of birth control, and then I'll have them re-get labs in about 6 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. Miss Maria said, which life extension lab did we have Katie do? We do a full comprehensive female panel, and then I also add cortisol there. So that's pretty much the request that you need to have. Unfortunately, if they go to their doctor or their healthcare provider, I'm pretty sure I've never not had a client run into issues or feedback or pushback for trying to get labs from a doctor. The healthcare system is just so broken, and it's just so, okay, weight loss panel has everything. That's cool. I actually don't think it has FSH and like 2 other ones, because I think somebody else just went to go get a weight loss panel and it didn't have it. What else? Speak it. Speak.
Sorry. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't, because I run it for myself and it never does.
Yeah. It misses like 3 of them. I can't remember what it is. I think it's FSH, testosterone.
It has testosterone because mine's
I don't know.
In a 13-minute one.
It definitely, I think it's FSH or LH. It's one of those that it doesn't have for sure.
Yeah. I know there's 3 things that I listed in the slide that it doesn't have on there, but I'm sure you could add them. I would honestly.
I don't know if you can with life extension though. I think you have to like pick your specifics. I'm not 100% sure, but what was the first one?
Any lab test now?
That one I think is really good.
Yeah, you can add stuff to that. And those clinics are everywhere. You can literally book it, walk right in. They literally just put the needle in your arm and walk out, and they email it to you in like 3 days. It's pretty convenient. And that one I think I've seen is the most cost effective for clients to be able to go get, and like the most schedule accommodating. It's called Any Lab Test Now is the place to go there. And then it's called I'll write it in the notes here. It's called a full comprehensive hormone panel. And then I add cortisol to it. And that's typically what I ask my male and female clients to get every single time. And then I think the other one's Quest Diagnostics, which I've personally never used. I've used LabCorp and Any Lab Test Now, but yeah. Other than that, dude, does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? How'd you guys like call 1? How was my presentation?
It was great. It was very enjoyable because a lot of my clients fit the bill for sure, you know.
Yeah. It's honestly like it's significantly more common of a diagnosis than people think it is, especially with just like the lifestyle we live, everybody on freaking birth control, everybody drinking and partying. Like, you know what I mean? Just if you look at our society as a whole, like estrogen dominance is becoming more and more common, which should not be a thing. Like just should not be a thing, but it is. So, all right, dudes. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to just stop. I'm just going to stop the recording right now. So everybody who's a new member here, welcome. I hope you guys enjoyed the first call. I don't know what call we're on now, But I'll talk to you guys in the next one.